You got a lot of people on social media saying that Jam is wrong because Dirk took care of him. Dirk gave him 50 bands when he got out, this, that, and the third. You got others saying that Jam not wrong for telling because Dirk stopped taking care of him. Dirk tried to kill him. Dirk got his baby mama killed.
OTF Jam broke down in court after telling on Lil Durk. The man who once described Durk as someone who took care of him through an entire prison sentence sat in that witness chair and spent hours telling 12 jurors everything he says he knows about the murder-for-hire conspiracy the government alleges Durk organized. And what made the courtroom so emotionally charged was not just the testimony itself, it was the relationship underneath it. These two men grew up in the same world, came from the same Chicago streets, and built a bond that lasted through prison sentences, losses, and years of a life that most people will never understand. When Jam finally sat down in that witness chair, what came out was not just testimony, it was the end of something. Stay with us because the story of how that bond ended and what Jam said when he finally took the stand is one of the most complicated and emotionally heavy things to come out of this trial so far. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down OTF Jam's full testimony and Lil Durk's federal murder-for-hire trial. The details he revealed about their childhood friendship, the alleged California operation, what he said happened inside that Hooters in San Diego, and what the defense is going to have to do to survive his account. Let's get into it. Before we get into what Jam said on the stand, let us be clear about what this trial is and what it is not. Because the emotional weight of a childhood friendship falling apart inside a federal courtroom can make it easy to lose track of the legal reality. Federal prosecutors allege that Lil Durk, born Durk Devontae Banks, organized and financed the murder-for-hire conspiracy targeting rapper Quando Rondo in retaliation for the November 2020 killing of King Von in Atlanta. The government alleges that this conspiracy culminated on August 19, 2022, when men connected to only the family attacked Quando Rondo at a gas station near the Beverly Center in Los Angeles. Quando Rondo survived. His 24-year-old cousin, Xavier Robinson, known as Lou Pab, was shot and killed. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty to all charges. The government must prove his case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury has not yet reached a verdict. OTF Jam's testimony is part of the prosecution's attempt to build that proof. It is not the proof itself, and every word he says on that stand is subject to cross-examination and the jury's own evaluation of whether he can be trusted. OTF Jam grew up in Chicago inside one of the city's most notorious gang environments. And before the jury heard a single word about Lil Durk or Quando Rondo, they heard about who Casey Hester is and where he comes from. He testified that he was blessed into the Black Disciples at 9 years old. That is not a typo, 9. He described being initiated into one of Chicago's most powerful gang structures before most children are done with elementary school. Between the ages of 10 and 18, he testified that he was involved in 10 to 15 separate shootings. A gun was first placed in his hands at 12 years old with instructions to shoot at a passing car. He described his role within the organization as a shooter, a designation that carried real status and respect. He also testified that Lil Durk was a member of the Black Disciples and that co-defendant DeAndre Wilson was a leader of Tay-Town within that same organization. This was not abstract background. It was Jam placing himself, Durk, and the people at the defense table inside the same world from the very beginning of their lives. Jam did not stop there. He testified about a violent history that stretched from his early teenage years into adulthood, and he did not minimize it. By his own account delivered under oath, he committed more than 100 armed robberies. He described committing his first robbery as a young teenager because his family needed food, with both of his parents struggling with severe drug addiction. He did not offer those circumstances as excuses. He offered them as facts about how his life developed in front of the same jury now deciding Lil Durk's fate. Prosecutors point to that candor as evidence of a witness who is not hiding anything. The defense points to that history as evidence of a man with extensive criminal experience who knows exactly how to tell a story that serves his own purposes. Then came the admissions about murder. According to Jam's testimony, the 2010 Racine, Wisconsin killing was not the only time he had taken someone's life. By his own account, under oath, he has been involved in 3 separate killings. He described the first at 17 years old when an older gang member ordered him during an armed robbery to eliminate someone who had seen his face. he put a gun to that person's head and pulled the trigger. He testified to the other killings with the same directness, placing himself as the person responsible and not attempting to soften what he admitted. That is the man who sat in that witness chair and told the jury that Lil Durk was the person behind an alleged murder-for-hire conspiracy. 3 admitted killings, over 100 armed robberies, a cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors, and the testimony of someone who says Durk once took care of him through an entire prison sentence. Now let us talk about the friendship, because this is where the testimony gets personal in a way that no financial record or surveillance photo ever could. Jam testified about what his relationship with Durk actually looked like from the inside, and the picture he painted was not one of a boss and an employee or an artist and an associate. It was a friendship. According to his account, during a previous prison sentence, Lil Durk regularly put money into his commissary account. Money on the books is not a small gesture inside the world Jam described. It is how you tell someone that they have not been forgotten, that someone on the outside still considers them worth taking care of. When Jam was released, Durk's assistants helped provide him with new clothes. Durk gave him money. And Jam described being taken on trips to places like Detroit and Miami as part of his reintegration into the OTF world. Think about what that sequence of support means over several years. Prison, then commissary money, then clothes, then cash, then travel. That is not a transaction. That is someone being brought back into a world that had kept a place for them. That is the relationship Jam described to the jury before he described anything about a murder-for-hire plot. He established what was between them first, and then he explained how it ended. And then Jam sat in that same chair and began describing Durk as the man he says gave the alleged order to go after Quando Rondo. That contradiction is what the title of this video is about. That is the emotional center of what happened in that courtroom. The man who says Durk once took care of him through an entire prison sentence is now describing him as the alleged architect of a federal murder-for-hire conspiracy. Jam appeared visibly uncomfortable throughout his testimony. Reporting from inside the courthouse described him as frequently fidgeting in his chair, rocking from side to side, shaking his head during certain exchanges, and covering his face during breaks in the proceedings. He occasionally made eye contact with Durk and with co-defendant Wilson before quickly looking away. Whatever anyone believes about why Jam is sitting in that chair, the physical reality of what he was doing is not lost on anyone paying attention. He was publicly describing someone from his own childhood as a man he says organized a murder-for-hire conspiracy, and the weight of that was visible in his body every time he moved. Now let us get into what Jam actually said about the alleged California operation, because this is the testimony that connects directly to the government's core theory. According to Jam's account, he and another OTF affiliate named Asa Houston traveled by plane to San Diego as part of the alleged operation targeting Quando Rondo. After landing, Jam testified that the two of them drove to a Hooters restaurant because they had been instructed to wait for the arrival of other members of the group. While at the Hooters, Jam testified that he was on FaceTime with an OTF affiliate known as Booney when he was informed of the plan to kill Quando Rondo. He also testified that he heard a voice he recognized as Lil Durk saying the words, "I'm here," coming from a separate phone in the background. Then, the group loaded into a Sprinter van on the way to carry out the alleged operation. It was inside that van, according to Jam's testimony, that Kayvon Grant, known as OTF Vonnie, distributed the weapons. Grant allegedly handed Jam a Beretta specifically because, in Jam's characterization, everyone in the group knew Jam was the one who would let it blow. That detail places Jam not just as a witness to the operation, but as someone who was allegedly given a weapon and expected to use it. Jam also testified that the alleged plan involved using a local marijuana dealer connected to OTF affiliate Duty Low. According to his account, this dealer was already in contact with Quando Rondo about a marijuana purchase, and that connection allegedly allowed the group to obtain information about Rondo's location, specifically his hotel address, with the intention of luring him outside under the pretext of a drug delivery and killing him when he came out. That is the alleged plan as Jam described it. Not a spontaneous confrontation, a deliberate operation built on a pre-existing relationship between Rondo and a dealer, used as a mechanism to get close to him. Then Jam testified about the weapons. According to his account, Kayvon Grant, known as OTF Vonnie, distributed firearms before the alleged operation began. Grant allegedly handed Jam a Beretta specifically because, in Jam's characterization, people within the group knew he was someone who was willing to use a gun. That detail is not incidental. It establishes Jam's alleged role in the operation itself, which is part of why his guilty plea in connection with this case carries so much weight. He is not testifying as a bystander or witness to someone else's crime. He is testifying as a person who has already admitted to his own participation. Let us be clear about what this means legally. Every piece of what Jam described in that courtroom is his testimony. It is part of the prosecution's case. It has not been independently established simply because he said it under oath. The defense will challenge every detail, including the FaceTime call, the hotel plan, and the weapon distribution. The jury is not required to accept Jam's account simply because he pleaded guilty and is cooperating. They have to evaluate everything he says against his background, his cooperation agreement, and the 30 largely unrecorded sessions he spent with investigators before he ever sat in front of him. Jam testified about what prosecutors consider one of the most important alleged moments in the entire case. According to his account, after King Von was killed in Atlanta in November 2020, there was an OTF gathering during which Durk allegedly communicated that anyone who successfully got to Quando Rondo or Lil Tim would be financially taken care of. Members of the group reportedly asked whether the amount was $500,000 or $1 million. Jam testified that Durk's response was essentially whatever, indicating the money was there and the exact figure was not the point. That alleged bounty meeting is the moment the prosecution needs the jury to believe in. It is the link between the grief of November 2020 and the alleged operation that prosecutors say eventually sent men to a gas station near the Beverly Center in Los Angeles. 2 years later, without that moment, the government has physical evidence of a shooting and travel and financial activity, but no direct testimony connecting Durk's emotional state after Von's death to an alleged decision to commission a killing. But the relationship between Jam and Durk was not static, and Jam's testimony made clear that long before the federal investigation arrived, the dynamic between them had already begun shifting in complicated directions. He described a trip to Miami during which they ran into rapper Tory Lanez and his entourage. Jam privately told Durk he wanted to rob Tory's artists for their jewelry. According to Jam's testimony, Durk's response in that moment was, "That's the Jam I've been waiting on, bro." Durk allegedly embraced the aggression, at least initially, but Jam's behavior quickly became something else entirely, a pattern of violence and recklessness that was drawing attention the entire circle could not afford. Then came the alleged bathroom confrontation during a music video shoot. Durk pulled Jam aside and told him directly to chill on the murders, because the heat he was bringing down, the police attention, and the federal eyes following his activity was putting everyone around him at risk. That is a significant shift. In one moment, Durk allegedly celebrated the aggression. In the next, he allegedly told him to stop because it had become a liability. That contradiction tells the jury something about the relationship and about how Durk allegedly viewed the people around him. Then came the moment that allegedly changed everything between them permanently. Rumors and paperwork began circulating in the streets that Jam was cooperating with law enforcement on previous cases. Durk's circle began to suspect that Jam was using his proximity to OTF as an insurance policy, gathering information to trade with investigators if he ever got caught again. The paranoia inside the circle grew, and then prosecutors introduced a 2023 group text that confirmed what many around Durk apparently already believed. In that message, Durk wrote to his crew, "As long as we don't break, they can tell them whatever." That is not a general legal statement. Prosecutors argue it is evidence of a man who knew the ship was sinking, who understood that someone in his circle was already talking to federal investigators, and who was trying to hold everyone else together before the whole thing collapsed. Once Durk allegedly concluded that the childhood friend he had supported through a prison sentence was actively feeding information to the government, the relationship ended completely. Durk cut Jam off. He isolated him from the circle, and before long, federal agents were making arrests across the entire group. Then came the 2023 group text that prosecutors believe reveals something important about what Durk knew and when he knew it. According to evidence discussed at trial, Durk wrote in a group message that as long as people did not break, investigators could hear whatever they wanted. Prosecutors interpret that message as evidence of someone who understood that cooperation from within his own circle was a real possibility, and was already thinking about how to contain it. For the government, the message demonstrates awareness of a conspiracy and an attempt to hold the people around him together. The defense can argue the message carries a completely different meaning, that it reflects nothing more than someone giving general legal guidance to people around him who were worried about investigations into other matters, and that interpreting it as consciousness of guilt in a murder-for-hire case is exactly the kind of contextual overreach the defense has been pushing back against since the trial began. Now let us talk about the 30 interviews, because that number does not go away just because Jam has taken the stand and told his story in open court. Federal investigators interviewed Casey Hester approximately 30 times before this trial began. Only 3 of those sessions were recorded. Brian Steele highlighted this pattern during the cross-examination of the government's lead detective earlier in the proceedings, and the detective acknowledged that the decision not to record most of those interviews was a matter of government preference. Now that Jam is on the stand himself, those 30 unrecorded sessions become the lens through which the defense wants the jury to examine every single allegation he makes. Did the FaceTime detail about hearing Durk's voice appear in the first interview, or did it emerge later? Did the account of the Beretta being handed to him match what he told investigators months earlier? Did the alleged bounty meeting sound the same in session 1 as it does now? Without recordings, nobody in that courtroom can check. And that invisibility is where Steele operates most effectively. The defense's central argument is not that Jam fabricated his entire testimony from nothing. It is that a man facing catastrophic sentencing exposure, who spent approximately 30 sessions mostly unrecorded with federal investigators across months or years, had both the incentive and the opportunity to shape and refine his account in ways that served his own interests alongside the government's. That is a legal argument grounded in documented circumstances, not speculation. The 30 interviews produced 3 recordings. The other 27 conversations produced what investigators took away in their notes, their recollections, and the summaries they wrote afterward. The jury is being asked to trust an account built across all of that, told to them by a man who has admitted to a killing at 17 and over 100 armed robberies, and who is cooperating in the hope of a better outcome for himself. For a case where the charges carry a mandatory life sentence, that is the weight the defense wants the jury to feel. Jam is a complicated witness for the prosecution, not just because of the 30 interviews, but because of the full scope of what he admitted to on the stand. He acknowledged over 100 armed robberies. He testified about taking a life at 17 years old. He placed himself inside the alleged California operation. He described receiving a weapon before the alleged plan was carried out. He admitted to being a shooter inside the Black Disciples from the time he was a child. None of those admissions automatically make him unreliable, but they paint a picture of a man with significant criminal exposure who has pleaded guilty to his own role in this case and is now cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for the possibility of a better outcome at sentencing. The prosecution can stand in front of that jury and argue that someone willing to admit all of that about himself must be telling the truth. The defense can stand in the same spot and argue that someone with that much criminal history and that much to gain from cooperation has the most powerful possible reason to tell prosecutors exactly what they need to hear. The question of whether to call Jam's decision a betrayal is one the documentary should not answer for you. But let us be real about what the emotional reality of this situation actually looks like. Durk allegedly put money on Jam's books through his entire bid. He helped clothe him when he came home. He brought him on trips, gave him cash, kept him inside the circle when a lot of people would not have. And then Jam sat in the federal courtroom, looked across at him, and laid out everything he says he knows about a murder-for-hire conspiracy with Durk at the center of it. That is cold. Whatever the legal justification, whatever cooperation agreement Jam signed, whatever sentence he is hoping to reduce, the human reality of what he did in that courtroom is that he switched up on someone who, by his own testimony, took care of him when he had nothing. From one perspective, Jam had a legal right to cooperate and save himself. From another, it is one of the most personal forms of betrayal this trial has produced. What Jam's testimony ultimately represents is a transformation of this trial into a deeply personal story about 2 people from the same Chicago streets who ended up on opposite sides of a federal prosecution. The government cannot explain the alleged bounty meeting through a surveillance photo. They cannot describe what the OTF world felt like after King Von died through a credit card receipt. They need someone who was in those rooms, who heard the conversations, who accepted the weapons, who who sat in the Hooters in San Diego waiting for the plan to unfold. Jam is that person, and the price of putting him on the stand is that the jury gets all of him, the 100 robberies, the 3 admitted killings, the cooperation agreement, and the 30 largely unrecorded sessions with federal investigators. The chronology of Jam and Durk's relationship, laid out from beginning to end, is the emotional story underneath all of the legal arguments in this trial. They came up together in Chicago inside the same gang environment, the same Black disciple structure. Jam became a shooter while Durk built what would eventually become only the family. When Jam was incarcerated, Durk allegedly kept money on his books throughout the sentence. When Jam came home, Durk allegedly clothed him, gave him money, brought him into the circle, took him on trips. Then the alleged behavior problems began. The Tory Lanez entourage conversation in Miami, the bathroom confrontation where Durk allegedly told him to chill. Then King Von's death in Atlanta in November 2020 and the alleged bounty meeting that followed. Then the alleged California operation, the plane to San Diego, the Hooters, the FaceTime call, the Beretta from Vonnie, then the federal investigation closing in around everyone. Then Jam pleading guilty. Then Jam sitting in a witness chair fidgeting, covering his face during breaks, and describing Lil Durk as the man who allegedly put all of it in motion. The jury now has to decide whether Jam is telling the truth, whether his account was shaped by the pressure of his own federal exposure, and whether the testimony he has given connects Lil Durk to the alleged conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. The most powerful part of this story is not whether Jam appeared visibly emotional in that courtroom. It is what the testimony represents. The same relationship that once meant money on the books, new clothes, and trips to Miami is now the instrument prosecutors are using to try to send Lil Durk away forever. Whether Jam's account survives Steele's cross-examination and whether the jury finds it reliable enough to convict are questions that have not yet been answered. What has been answered is that OTF Jam sat in that chair, pointed at someone he has known since childhood, and told the jury everything he says he knows. Drop a comment and tell us what you think about where this trial is heading. And tap in on the video on screen for everything else we have been covering.